Good morning, dear friends. So glad to see you. Good morning, dear friends. So glad to see you. Good morning, dear friends. So glad to see you. Good morning. Good morning to you, and welcome to Storytime in the Woods. I'm Miss Becca. Some of us may know each other from Storytime in the schoolhouse, and some of us may be meeting for the first time. Either way, I am glad you're here, and I'm so glad that you get to be a part of something new, this new Storytime that I'm going to have in the woods each week. I'm going to find a cozy place somewhere in the woods and sit down and tell you a story. And I'm so glad you get to be here and be a part of it. Friends, this morning I followed a twisty-turny path down the woods from my house, down the trail from my house, to this place in the woods. It's a little overgrown here, but I'm hoping to make this into a nice storytelling spot. So after I tell you the story, I will continue to work on clearing some of the overgrown stuff here. Meanwhile, when I'm down here, if I'm really quiet, I can hear the birds. There are lots of them. They're flying everywhere right now, looking for things to eat on this winter's day. I'm glad you can be here with me. I'm going to tell you a story today called The Mitten. And in fact, I wore mittens today. Mittens have all of your fingers together in the same little pocket. When you wear gloves, each finger is separate. I really do like mittens. And the man in our story liked to wear mittens too, and one day he went on a walk in the woods and he put on his mittens. Let's call the story fairies and I'll tell you the rest. Story fairies, come and bring stories clear and true. Story fairies, come and bring stories to our story ring. The sun's just coming over the mountain here and shining down through the trees, going in and out of the clouds. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived in a little cottage at the edge of the woods. One of his favorite things to do was to go for a walk, and he loved to start his day that way. On this particular morning, he called his dog, and they got ready to go for a walk together. The man put on his warm hat and a warm scarf and a warm coat, and then he put on his mittens. And he opened the door, and out he went with his doggy friend. And they walked down the trail, and the more they walked, the warmer the man felt. And he decided that it was warm enough to take off his hat and his scarf and his mittens. He put his hat in one pocket and his scarf in the other. And when he took off his mittens, he put one in one back pocket and one in the other. But that second mitten didn't quite get down in his pocket, and it fell out, and it landed on the forest floor. But the man didn't know, and he kept walking with his dog. And the mitten just stayed there on the forest floor all by itself, until a little mouse came scurrying out of a log. And she scurried this way and that, and she found the mitten. And she thought, this looks like a cozy place for me to take a nap. So she stuck her little twitchy nose in, and she said, hello inside this mitten. This is Squeak the mouse. Is there anyone in here? And when no one answered, she scampered right in, and she curled up at the end of the mitten, and she fell asleep. And once again, all was quiet in the woods, except for the sound of the breeze moving through the trees. And then somewhere in the distance, a frog jumped out of a bog. It was a chilly day, and he thought, oh boy, I better find a warm place to go. And he hopped across the forest floor, and he came upon the mitten. And he looked inside the mitten and said, hello, this is Hoppity the Frog. Is there anyone inside this mitten? Why, yes, it is I, Squeak the mouse, inside this mitten. Then Hoppity said, can I come in? And Squeak the Mouse moved a little bit this way and a little bit that way and made enough room for Hoppity Frog to come inside the mitten. And as soon as he got into that warm mitten, he curled up and fell fast asleep. The forest was quiet again. And then there was a sound of hopping on the forest floor. The leaves on the ground went crunch, 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 crunch. That was the sound of Fleetfoot the rabbit. Fleetfoot had woken up that morning, and he was going this way and that across the forest floor, and he had been moving so fast that he was tired. And that's when he found the mitten, and he thought this would make a nice place to take a nap. So he stuck his twitchy little rabbit nose in the mitten and said, "Hello, this is Fleetfoot the rabbit. Is there any room inside this mitten?" "Oh, why, yes, this is Squeak the Mouse and Hoppity the Frog, but we can make room inside this mitten." And so they squeezed a little this way, and they squeezed a little that way, and they made just enough room for Fleetfoot the rabbit to come into the mitten and curl up and fall asleep. The three of them were peacefully sleeping when a deer started to walk this way and that across the forest floor. She was tired and wanted to have a snack, and she came upon the mitten, and she thought, well, maybe I should take a nap before I have my snack. She put her head inside the mitten and said, "Hello, this is Nimble the deer. Is there anyone inside this mitten?" "Why, yes, it is Squeak the Mouse and Hoppity the Frog and Fleetfoot the rabbit," said Squeak the Mouse. "Can you make some room for me?" said Nimble the deer. And so they squeezed a little this way, and they squeezed a little that way, and they made enough room for Nimble the deer to come into the mitten and curl up and fall asleep. It was so warm and cozy inside the mitten. Once again, the animals were soon fast asleep. The only thing you could hear in the forest was the sound of the breeze in the trees and the birds singing in the distance. That was until you could hear the rumble-bumble of Rumble Bumble the bear. She had come out of where she was taking her long winter's nap and thought she would look for a new place to sleep. That's when she came upon the mitten. She stuck her big, shiny black nose in that mitten and said, "Hello, this is Rumble Bumble the bear. Is there anyone inside this mitten?" Well, that woke everyone up inside, and Squeak the Mouse said, "Why, yes, there is Squeak the Mouse and Hoppity the Frog and Fleetfoot the Rabbit and Nimble Deer inside this mitten." "Can you make some room for me?" said Rumble Bumble. "Well, I'm not sure if there's any room left," said Squeak the Mouse. "Oh, please," said Rumble. And so they squeezed a little bit this way, and they squeezed a little bit that way, and they made just enough room for Rumble Bumble to crawl into the mitten. And it was tight, but it was cozy, and once again the animals fell asleep. And at this point, the old man and his dog had already walked a long way down the trail, and he was beginning to feel tired and hungry. He thought it was time to go back home for lunch. So he turned around, and as he did so, he realized there was still a chilly breeze in the air, and he reached for his pockets to put on his mittens. He put on one mitten, and then he reached to put on the other, but he couldn't find it in his pocket. He checked his other pockets, and sure enough, it was gone. So he looked at his dog, and he said, "All right, boy, I want you to go find our mitten." And the dog went running down the trail as fast as he could. And he ran until he came to the mitten, and he found it there full of sleeping animals. He took a sniff, and then he let out a howl. That woke up everyone inside the mitten. Rumble Bumble came out first, and she rumbled and bumbled all the way back to where she was taking her winter's nap. And then Nimble the deer came back and sprang into action and disappeared in the woods. Fleetfoot the rabbit came next and hopped quickly back to his home. And then Hoppity the frog and Squeak the mouse quickly followed, hopping and scurrying off into the distance. It wasn't long until the old man caught up to his dog and he came to the mitten, lying there on the forest floor. So he picked it up and he brushed it off and he put it back on. And he and his dog walked the rest of the way home, back to their house for some lentil vegetable soup for lunch. And the old man never knew what had happened inside his mitten while he was gone. And all was well in the world. Friends, that is the story of the mitten. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed being with me out here in the woods for story time in the woods. I am glad you're here. You matter to me. I can't wait to see you here next week. In the meantime, I hope more than anything that you know that you are loved. I'll see you next week.